and appreciated the music. Music is a very big part of the Poor People's Campaign and how we inspire ourselves and lift our voices. We're really pleased to have you all join us here today. My name is Nancy Berlin, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here in Los Angeles. I'm joining you from Los Angeles. We'll have our others presenters present themselves as they come on screen. But first, we want to know who you all are out there. So we ask you to use the chat to put your name and your pronouns and where you're located. And that way we get to see who our audience is and who's come here to be with us today. Also, because of the format we're using, the way we're going to do questions and answers from all of you is for you to drop those questions that you may have into the chat, or any comments that you have, and we'll do our best to keep an eye on them and bring them up periodically. We're just great to have you all here today, and we're going to get going. I'm going to turn it over to Nell.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you all for joining us again. Welcome to the breakout session at the California Progressive Alliance third annual conference. The breakout you're a part of is the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And I'm Nell Hand, and I use she and her pronouns. And I am located on Wichita Lonely Land, which is also known as Oakland, California. And I have the honor of serving as a co-chair of the California State Campaign. So thank you. And so I'm gonna share my screen and give you a little bit of intro about the history of the Poor People's Campaign from 1968, and then the launch of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, which was called for in 2017 and launched in 2018. So, calling for a new and unsettling force, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emphasized the need for poor whites, Blacks, Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans to unite. He asserted that the Poor People's Campaign would only be successful if the poor could come together across all the obstacles and barriers set up to divide them, and if they could demand the attention and resources being diverted because of the US engagement in the Vietnam War. And in the months leading up to the 1968 Poor People's Campaign, Dr. King articulated a clear formula for how the poor can claim power. He said, power for poor people will mean having the ability, the togetherness, the aggressiveness to make the power structure of this nation say yes when they may be desirous to say no. And although Dr. King was assassinated in April, organizers went ahead with the call for a Poor People's Campaign. And in May, Resurrection City was built on the National Mall. In the 6 weeks that they were there, they housed 3,000 people, and demonstrations and solidarity visits drew many more thousands to the encampment. Residents braved torrential rains, interminable mud, undercover informants, and hostile police. And Resurrection City programs included a child care center, health and social services, a Poor People's University with ongoing seminars and lectures, free meals, a daily newspaper, cultural activities in the Soul Center, a city council, a finance committee, and a public relations center. They even had their own zip code. Now, obviously, they didn't win everything they went there for, but it was a watershed in the civil rights movement, moving from racial equality platform to a moral fusion movement that included class issues and economic goals. In 2017, Reverend Dr. Lizdale Harris of the Kairos Center and Reverend Dr. William Barber of Repairs of the Breach, along with hundreds of local and national partners, called for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, taking up the work from 1968 to challenge what King had called the triple evils: systemic poverty, racism, and militarism. And they added ecological devastation and the distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism, which blames us for poverty and claims there's not enough. And we describe these as the five interlocking injustices. We have a set of 12 fundamental principles that guide our work and how we do it. And so we'll drop a link in the chat so that you can see what those 12 principles are. But we want you to know that the Poor People's Campaign is a movement building organism, not an organization. We're organizing in 45 states, building from the bottom up, rooted in a moral analysis based on our deepest religious and constitutional values that demand justice for all. We are nonpartisan, but deeply political. The most recent and comprehensive iteration of our demands is the Jubilee Policy Platform. The campaign started with an audit, the souls of poor folks. That asked the question, what has changed in the 50 years since Dr. King called for the Poor People's Campaign? And we found that there were 140 million people living at or near the poverty level. The following year, we released the moral budget, which addressed the question of where the resources come from to address the needs of 43% of the population who are poor or low wealth. And in 2020, the Jubilee Policy Platform was released. And that is a document that establishes what the policy changes are that would end poverty in the US. And so what you'll see in this slide and on the next couple slides is the Jubilee art that was created by movement artist extraordinaire David Solnit. And I know those of you who were in the main room got to see some of his work around the mural that went up in front of the federal building calling for building back fossil free and no on line 3. So these are the 5 principles of the Jubilee Policy Platform. It starts with that we need a moral revolution to address the breach. The second one is everybody in, nobody out. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. We've had enough trickle down and we know that doesn't work. Prioritize the leadership of those who are most impacted, and debts that cannot be paid must be relieved. And then these are the 5 parts of the Jubilee Platform. Establish justice and end systemic racism, the right to democracy and equal protection under the law. That's non-negotiable. Promote the general welfare. We consider that welfare is a right. And actually the Jubilee Policy Platform even calls for a care income for caregivers who have been unpaid historically, recognizing that that is also dignified work and that we have a right to an adequate standard of living. In part 3, ensure domestic tranquility, the right to work with dignity. We have been pressing for $15 in a union, along with Fight for 15, One Fair Wage, and others. We believe that we should secure the blessings of liberty, that everyone has the right to health and a healthy environment, and provide for the common defense, reprioritizing our resources. So, yeah, so I want to thank you for your participation here. And next, we're going to hear from David White, who's going to talk some about the goals of the campaign and introduce our testifiers.
Thank you, Neil. My name is David White, and I've been with the Poor People's Campaign since 2018, when there was a concerted effort to take direct action at the state capitol in Sacramento. It was a coordinated effort with 40 state campaigns to take our demands to the state capitol. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm located on the eastern shore of the San Francisco Bay. I'm currently active with the statewide coordinating committee and the statewide legal working group. One thing I want to focus on is the true thread that runs through the entire campaign. First of all, when you look at what Nell has outlined, and I think the more you hear about the campaign this afternoon, it gets pretty clear that what we're talking about is really huge. Our commitment is basically to transform the economy, the government, and society. And that's a very huge commitment. We talk a lot in terms of analysis of the causes. We're well grounded in facts and research. And yet, the true bottom line, the true kernel, the core of what this is about, it's about each individual who is particularly impacted, directly impacted by one or more of these interlocking injustices in their lives. And that's what we keep track of throughout our campaign. The reality is that we need to be listening to those who are most impacted, those who have the most experience, and those who can clearly describe what these issues are, and those who can have a clear understanding as to what the remedy can be. And so that's our fundamental thread that runs through everything. We are dedicated and committed to lifting up those who are most impacted by these interlocking injustices. And that means not only full inclusion, but it means a conscious and concerted effort to be sure that in this process, in building this movement, we are deepening the leadership of those most impacted, so that we fulfill our commitment of building power for the people most impacted by these interlocking injustices. And so that means hearing their voices. And fortunately, we have two people with us today who are going to provide testimony about their experience and what this really means in their own lives. And so I would like to welcome Jackie and welcome Linda, and thank you both for being here today. It's great to have you, and we really appreciate you participating with us this afternoon. First of all, I'd like for Jackie to begin. If you're ready to introduce yourself and tell us about your own experience. Jackie? And you're still on mute, Jackie. Jackie, can you hear me? I'm not sure you're aware, but you were on mute.
David, maybe we should go to Linda and I'll try to work with Jackie to figure out what's wrong.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Nancy. Linda, could you go ahead with your testimony and introduce yourself and then tell us about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, David. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm happy to be here on this panel. My name is Linda. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I started supporting the Poor People's Campaign last year because I was just fed up with the vicious injustices that the government and corporations and special interests keep inflicting on working families, women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community. I was drawn to Reverend Dr. William Barber's message and the Poor People's Campaign's mantra, everybody's got the right to live, as you heard in the opening clip. But honestly, in the richest country in the world, it shouldn't be about living. It should be about thriving. My personal story relates to the demand to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour that is sort of all in the news now. I've worked in the food service and hospitality industry for the past 7 years. I've been a grocery packer and delivery driver. I've been a restaurant cook and server. I've been a culinary instructor and tour guide, and also a personal chef for families in the Bay Area. This has all been in California, so luckily I've always had one fair wage, which meant that by law I was guaranteed at least the state's full minimum wage plus tips on top, and I was not subjected to the sub-minimum wage for tip workers that is on the books in 43 other states in this country, which can be as low as $2.13 an hour. The places I worked at, I distributed the tips equally between front of house and back of house workers. So it really helps to have the peace of mind that there's a baseline wage I can count on every week. And I'm also shielded from the blatant sexual harassment that is really rampant in those 343 states. When I lost my job due to the pandemic, fortunately, my wages were high enough to qualify for unemployment benefits. It took 3 months and a lot of follow-up, but it finally came, and I'm one of the lucky ones. This may sound like it's a success story, but it's not really the whole story. All of this doesn't mean that I'm immune from other issues in my industry. For example, it's extremely expensive to live here in the Bay Area. The living wage here is probably above $30 an hour. Because of that, jobs are very competitive. and they're hard to come by. And I've always had to have 2 to 3 jobs at the same time, just to push together a livable income. And the constant hustling can really wear on you, and just always making you wonder if you're ever going to be okay. Then there will be times when a shift will be slow and management will send me home early and just depriving me of my wages for the rest of that day. And in spaces where I'm one of the very few people of color, I'll notice microaggressions from my white coworkers. Like they will take credit for something I said or did earlier. And these actions, they accumulate over time, and they can really chip away at a sense of self-worth as just as an individual. And all of this is common in my industry, but it doesn't mean that it's okay. We all deserve to prosper and live in dignity and with respect, regardless of who we are, where we live, and what we do for work. And having the basic economic security will build a foundation of power and strength, so that it just makes it a little easier for us to fight the other battles that we have. So that's why I'm strongly supporting the fight to raise the federal minimum wage, and also supporting the Poor People's Campaign's effort to lift up the voices of poor and low wealth Americans. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. And I think your testimony is especially timely, given the issues that are at the very forefront of public discussion right now. And we appreciate your effort and participation in that. And we'll be standing by you during this time. So let me see if Jackie can be ready. Jackie, would you like to introduce yourself and share with everyone your testimony?
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Linda, for being unmuted. Um, Hello, and to Nancy, of course, Nell and Irene, and the Poor People's Campaign. I'm Jacqueline J. Johnson. I am consider myself a writer, a poet, and an activist now living in Los Angeles. I've been personally impacted by the systemic racism that comes with being a Black woman because I grew up basically in Orange County, which is NRA Republican County. I'm actively involved in my community, but my income wasn't enough to pay rent and all of my co-payments for medical expenses that incurred while I was living there. I was given an opportunity to affiliate with Alexandria House, a home for women and children experiencing homelessness, domestic violence, and trafficking. I live with other members of the Alexandria House community that provides affordable housing in a very unaffordable city. In June of 2019, I was so honored to be one of the delegates selected by the Poor People's Campaign to represent California at the Call for Moral Revival Congress, which took place in Washington, D.C. I was selected to attend Congress as a representative of Alexandria House. While I was there, I had the absolute honor of staying on Howard University campus, which is part of the historical Black community, Black colleges and universities. And I am a product of a historical Black college and university. So this was like, it was a, it was just a dream and a wonderful, and they have showers in the rooms now. When I was in school, you had to make that trek down, where everybody else was, and the water was always cold. Um, it was inspiring at the Congress with over 1,500 participants from across the country. I attended the workshops, the forums, the panels, and shared meals with so many others, building relationships with people and movements from 40 states, both learning and working to build the national multiracial fusion movement. The Congress also featured and release of the Poor People's Campaign moral budget, which included demands to restore TANF, which is a temporary assistance to needy families, to the previous funding levels, and for public hearings on child welfare institutions that are using their resources to take children and spending 10 times more money to keep a child out of the home than they are to keep them in the home. We also participated in a forum with 9 of the 2020 presidential candidates. There was a Freedom School and Powerful Poor People's hearing on Capitol Hill. After the Congress, some of us took advantage of being in Washington, D.C. to meet with legislators and their staffs on anti-poverty legislation, including the American Family Act, which would pay a monthly child benefit for every child in families with an annual income of less than $200,000. A version of this has been included in the American Rescue Plan, which is the United States in the Senate right now. And I'm so proud to be a part of helping that to happen. Coming home from the World Congress, I've really been motivated to work with the Poor People's Campaign. I'm now part of the local steering committee in Los Angeles and helped to carry out voter registration at Alexandria House last fall. And I did one of those speeches about why we need to vote. I look forward to continuing to work with the Poor People's Campaign where everyone is included. And as we build our movement from the bottom up, I'm just really thankful to all of you for being a part of this and want to leave you with the words that we are making a difference because we are the difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. It's really, it really sounds like your participation in the events in Washington, D.C. in 2019 with the Poor People's Campaign was kind of a pivotal moment for you.
Yes.
To be a part of that. It's really good that you could, and it's really valuable that we are all able to work together. And I know that you're particularly active in the Los Angeles area. I want to just mention that this testimony and the testimony of everyone who can do this is really valuable in building a new narrative based on justice and equity. And I thank you for that, Jackie. So I think next we're going to be going perhaps back to Nancy for a video. Is that accurate, or is it to Irene?
Yeah, well, let me see if I can get that video. Hey, hold on just a sec.
So I have it, Nancy, if that would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Feels like the old mass meetings. We're here, and all of our diversity, we're here in the human family.
There is a fire raging now for the poor of this society. They are living in tragic conditions because of the terrible economic injustices that keep them locked in.
We have to deal with our war economy and systemic racism and systemic poverty and ecological devastation. And finally, we have to deal with the moral narrative.
We are traveling around this country building this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. What we want to do now is hear a little bit from the local community who are a part of this campaign.
I've spent 5 years, 5 or so more years homeless. Living on minimum wage has caused me to have to figure out on a daily basis how to afford basic necessities.
While the U.S. sends trillions abroad, my friends, family, and fellow veterans suffer the economic consequences of the war economy.
I have 2 children, and I enjoy raising them while acknowledging that being poor is a struggle of human rights.
But when I lost my housing, healthcare, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
I want to stand here and reclaim the power and dignity of the mujeres in my life.
I can't afford to pay a cab.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
And in the aftermath of climate change disasters, poor people and people of color are the ones to lose their homes.
Who can't survive this 725?
No parent in America should have to bury their children for lack of medical attention.
Being poor is not a sin. Poverty is a sin. Being homeless is not a sin. Homelessness is a sin.
And we are here, and it's time for us to be the remnant that can transform the nation.
We are calling for a season of moral resistance, a season of organizing, a season of nonviolent, massive civil disobedience.
There will be a movement that will break through the con and cut through the lies and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
So that video was from the launch of the Poor People's Campaign. So that was one of the earliest gatherings where, you know, clearly they were amplifying the voices of people who are directly impacted as a way of setting the tone for the campaign. And we feel like that's a critical part of the work of building power to change the policies that make and keep us poor. And so we really are always about, you know, hearing from the people who are directly impacted, because we've been spoken for, we've been spoken about, we've been spoken to, but it's not that usual really that we get to speak in our own voices, tell our own stories, and be heard. So thank you for joining us today. And so let's see, Irene, or should we take questions, or should we move on to the next part of the agenda? I don't know, Victor, if you have any questions that have been put in the chat or comments that people have. Okay, it sounds like not. So Irene, I wonder if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'll be sharing my screen.
Okay.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Irene Montantes. I'm a California Coordinating Committee member. I'm also a steering committee member with the LA chapter. I'll be sharing picture slides and share how we are building power to change policy and how we are working on movement building. This first picture.
Irene, can you make that full screen?
Let's see.
If not, no worries.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this picture you see here is one of the pictures taken from our 40 days of action at the California State Capitol. In May 2018, we took action in 39 states across the country for 40 days of direct actions in our state capitals. We also had teach-ins and cultural events. The campaign then transitioned into voter registration and mobilization. In California, activists had 6 actions that led to 51 people being arrested or detained. One of these actions included knocking on the governor's office door, leading to arrests. Our goal with these actions was to get elected officials and the media's attention. The second picture here you see is week 4 of our 40 days of direct action. We chose to shed light on big oil and other corporate interests and the massive expansion of offshore drilling that affects our environment. We also were there that week to demand that the Christopher Columbus statue in the rotunda of the California State Capitol be taken down for his legacy of genocide, rape, ecological devastation, and war on Indigenous people, leading to the removal and displacement and erasure of millions of Indigenous people. The exciting part of this action was that the statue ended up getting removed from the state capitol July of last year. This picture is the organizers from the LA chapter of the California Poor People's Campaign. There's also California Coordinating Committee members in this picture, and members who are affiliated with the SEIU, Black Lives Matter, the Alexandria House, the Global Women's Strike, Union de Vecinos. And we usually meet 2 to 3 times a month to update our chapter on national updates, upcoming actions, working group progress. And our working groups consist of structure working group, arts working group, faith working group, newsletter working group, and a policy and education working group. In 2009, we went to Washington to unite with all our comrades from across the nation and deliver our demands, which was our moral agenda and declaration of fundamental rights. The demands contained within that document a comprehensive response to the systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, militarism, and war economy plaguing our country today. In June 2019, we convened over 1,000 community leaders in Washington, D.C. for the Poor People's Moral Action Congress, which included the largest presidential candidates forum of the pre-debate season. The release of our Poor People's Campaign moral budget and a hearing before the House Budget Committee on the issues facing the 140 million poor and low-income people in the nation. Over the next 9 months, we embarked on 25 states with our We Must Do More tour, which was to mobilize, organize, register, and educate the people most impacted, which led toward a unprecedented digital mass People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington in June 2020. It was actually, because of COVID, it was a mass digital assembly, and we had over 2 million participants online. The Poor People's Campaign is organizing folks all across the nation to address poverty through income and housing. Our campaign is a fusion movement working on uniting all races under the commonality of hardship while presenting solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Yes, we are active. we believe in moving and shaking and bringing people together and holding our public and elected officials accountable. And that's part of why we're really excited to be here at the California Progressive Alliance conference, because we know that we're in alignment with the goal of having progressive public elected officials, who really are putting the needs and concerns of their constituents at the center of their work, their legislative work. And we are determined that we're going to hold folks accountable, that we are, again, nonpartisan, because we feel like it's not about Democrat or Republican or left or right, that it's about right and wrong. And so our work, that Irene spoke about, showed a lot of actions that were taking place in California, and then us coming together as a national campaign in Washington, D.C. And so, let's see. So there's a question about upcoming planned actions. I think that's your cue, Nancy.
I think it is. Okay. Do you have the slides or do I? I'm sorry.
I have them. So if you're ready, I'll share my screen.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Always ready to talk about acting.
Okay, let's see.
So I'm so glad that question came in right now, because we are so ready to tell you about the exciting campaigns that we have to take action right now. And I love this picture because there's Jackie again, right under Fight Poverty, Not the Poor. Coming out of the Jubilee Policy Platform, which you heard about a little bit earlier from Nell, we developed specific demands that we're putting forward to the Biden-Harris administration, things that we say that they need to take in the first 100 days of office. And we are calling these our 14 policy priorities to heal the nation, a moral and economic agenda for the first 100 days. And there's a lot in this. I'm not going to tell you all of it, but I just want you to know that it's a big and bold platform, because that's what our communities need and that's what our communities deserve. Reverend Barber put it this way when we first released these 14 policy priorities. If America does not address what's happening with visionary social and economic policy, the health and well-being of the nation is at stake. What we need is long-term economic policy that establishes justice, promotes the general welfare, rejects decades of austerity, and builds strong social programs that lift society from below. So I'm going to just briefly show you, we're going to show you on the screen the 14 priorities, not go in a lot of depth, but you'll see that we're calling for money for COVID testing and vaccine, healthcare, quality healthcare for everyone. Our big banner issue right now to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour immediately for everyone in the country. And then some things about updating poverty measures, guaranteeing quality housing for all, something in California that we so desperately need. A jobs program, a real jobs program, protecting and expanding voting and civil rights, which I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. Education, immigration reform. And so you can see that this isn't, we're not just tackling one little problem, we're tackling everything that our communities need. And, but obviously we can't do everything all at once. So we have 3 top priorities right now. They're to get the COVID relief that everybody needs in this country right away, which is number 1 on our list. To raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour now. And if you've been following the news, of course, this is a huge debate, and we're not giving up. And then voting rights, which is number 7. And these are all really quite connected. Whoops. Oh, no, that's okay. One back. Yeah, that one. Thank you. So you can see here that you can sign on to these 14 policy priorities, and we really encourage you to be doing that as an organization and as an individual, because the more of us who sign on to it, the more powerful that we are. Now, how are we pushing these demands and priorities out right now? Continuing on what Irene showed you that we're doing, we are doing this through what we call our Moral Mondays. And some of you may be familiar with this. The Moral Mondays, the idea and the inspiration for Moral Mondays came from North Carolina, which is where Reverend Barber has his roots. It's his home turf. And they began doing Moral Mondays in 2012 to push back against a Republican governor and legislature there. And they did a lot of direct action and civil disobedience at their state capital to move their agenda. We've taken on these Moral Mondays as one of our major action and organizing tools. And right now we are doing Moral Mondays throughout the first 100 days of the Biden administration. So through now, we've started them and we'll go through the end of April. It's a way for us to educate people and to gather our communities together. We do them online and sometimes in COVID-safe ways in person. But it's also a way for us to take action together, not just to educate ourselves, not just to hear from each other, but to really take immediate action. You'll see, well, if you join one of our Moral Mondays, you'll see that we include all the things that you're seeing here today. We have music and videos to help inspire us and connect us to each other. We always have testifiers. We center every Moral Monday in the stories of people who are directly impacted by these interlocking injustices. And we do that because by changing the narrator, by centering low-income and low-wage workers and people who are impacted across the country, by centering them, we also change our narrative. And we insist that the most impacted people speak for themselves and be part of the leadership in everything that we do. In every Moral Monday, we have an analysis of the issues. We have the facts. We have the figures because, as Reverend Barber says, we don't want to be loud and wrong. We want to be right. And then we always have a link to actions. In the first 3 Moral Mondays we did this year, we focused on the minimum wage and raising the minimum wage, as you heard Linda talk about. And we know that it didn't make it into this COVID relief package, but we're not giving up. And you'll hear more from us about that, because as the richest nation in history, there is no excuse for denying the human rights of living wages to everyone in this country. The last week's Moral Monday we did was about ecological devastation, one of the injustices that we talk about. And we heard from communities who've been targeted by these destructive practices of corporations and governments. Irene mentioned that also. We heard from those who are struggling to defend Apache sacred land in Oak Flats. We heard from organizers in Cancer Valley in Louisiana, and also from folks in West Virginia, Chicago, and a number of other places, which is a campaign that we will continue. We have a really special Moral Monday coming up this Monday, because there are two events that we're commemorating this Monday. It's International Women's Day, and it's also the 56th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, which was the march in Selma, Alabama, where so many people were brutally attacked. So I think that's the next slide now.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you can see it. We're calling it Women on the Front Line to highlight the fearless and courageous women who have always been among the architects of every major social justice shift in the history of this nation. And so even after the 56 years since the march in Selma, we are still fighting for a real democracy that's free of racist voter suppression laws. And so that's a big part of what we'll hear about. And we're still fighting for gender equity, as you know. So that's how we're also commemorating International Women's Day. And we'll be calling on the Senate and the White House and Congress in general again to find a way to $15 an hour minimum wage, which is really just a floor, right? We all need even more than that for a living wage. And to demand all the other things that we need, the unemployment benefits, expanded health care, and a guaranteed income for all of us. So we hope you will be able to join us for that as we push forward these 14 policy priorities. I also want to give you a sneak preview to the Moral Monday we're going to have after that on the 15th, because there's a really special way you can join us in that. On Monday, March 14th, all of our state campaigns across the country are going to be doing state actions in their states to deliver these these policy priorities to our elected officials in our states. We'll be going to our state houses to deliver them to our governors and the leaders in the state assembly and the state senate. And we'll be doing it online because we always do them online to give everybody an opportunity to participate. But we will also have some ways to do some COVID safe in-person actions on that day. So you'll hear more about how to sign up in a minute. We hope you will do that, and then you'll get all the information you need to join these powerful events. Yeah, so thank you. We hope to see you there.
And Nancy, I would just make one detail. Monday, March 15th, Monday is March the 15th. So when you mentioned the 14th, it's actually the next day on the 15th.
All right, 15th, right.
Don't want to be too early.
No.
So do we have any questions at this point?
No questions at the moment, David.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other thoughts or topics that somebody might want to fill in before we close? I do have some closing comments, of course, as we leave, but we still have a little bit of time if there are some items that people would like to bring up.
I have a quick question. Nancy, the in-person action that you mentioned that could take place on the 15th, is that in Sacramento or is that in state legislature offices?
We're still trying to sort out exactly where we're going to be. I think it's pretty clear that we'll have something at the state capitol, and we may have other actions as well. So we're having some meetings this week to plan it, and we'll definitely let everyone know the details as we have them.
We do have one quick question. They're asking how we hold our legislators accountable.
Well, I can start and others can add in. I think the main thing is to raise your voice, because if they don't hear from us, then they say, well, it's not popular, there's no public opinion, I'm not hearing from my constituents, it doesn't matter to them, they don't agree with you. And so we really have to raise our voices. There's one of the kind of traditional Poor People's Campaign songs is, somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. And so I think that is one of the main things, is that the Moral Mondays are set up so that if you are on the live stream, you can click on a link and send a letter to the senators or the Congress people, whoever the people who they've identified as the people that we're pressing. And so we make it as easy as we can. It's always good to join. We're on Twitter. And so if you see tweets from the campaign, please feel free to retweet those, add your own tweets, and join in wherever you are. If you want to put your where you are in the chat, then we can connect you with folks who are in your region. In California, there are 6 regional steering committees: San Francisco Bay Area, Sacramento, San Diego, Orange County, the Inland Empire, and Los Angeles. And then the rest of the state is what we call an at-large region. And we have monthly meetings for people who are in the at-large region so that they can meet other people from their area and begin to sort out the process of forming a regional steering committee. We don't have the power of wealth, but we definitely have the power of numbers, because that 140 million figure, people who are living at or near the poverty line, that was pre-COVID. And we know that millions more people have lost wages, lost income, lost businesses, have become, poor during this pandemic. And so our numbers, sadly, are growing. And so the thing of joining the Poor People's Campaign and participating virtually, if it's, if you need for that to be COVID safe, that's understood. But we do look forward to when we can resume having in-person events and activities. You saw in some of the video footage and some of the photos that were shared that we believe in going to the state houses and to the legislatures and to the Capitol to let our presence be seen and felt.
And now I wanted to add something to that. That's great. I was thinking also about what's going on right now with the minimum wage. So Jackie mentioned that when we were in Washington, D.C. at the World Congress, that we had a presidential candidates forum, and one of the people at that forum was now Vice President Kamala Harris, but at that point she was a presidential candidate. And we have her on video saying that she supports increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we're holding her to that. If anybody who reads the LA Times, in this morning, in the LA Times, there's an article about it. And the very first line of the article is Reverend Barber saying, Harris said she was going to do this, that we were going to do this, and we're holding her to it. And so these are the ways we do this. And that forum in Washington, D.C., as Jackie said, there were 1,500 people there. Were there a lot of people who saw that? And we've got videos of it too. So we make that known. We don't just say, oh, well, that was then. We're going to hold people to their word. If they promise something, that's what we need, then we're going to keep pushing at them.
And so there's another question in the chat. Adam is asking about, is this a movement formed of a coalition of progressive organizations statewide?
Well, I can start, and maybe one of you all can continue on. One of the things that we like to say about the Poor People's Campaign is we're not an organization, we're an organism. And so what we mean by that is that we're not about trying to create all the structures necessarily that go into maintaining an organization that goes on. We're flexible and we're evolutionary, like an organism would be, to pivot and to meet the demands that are here with us. We do have partner organizations who work with us, and many of us are members of other organizations, of course, doing lots of work in our communities. But we're not technically a coalition per se. There's lots of people who join as individuals as well.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay. So we posted in the chat a way to sign up with the Poor People's Campaign. www.poorpeoplescampaign.org is the website for national. And you can go there and find all kinds of information about the Poor People's Campaign. We have fact sheets for each state. We have fact sheets on the costs of poverty, fact sheets on militarism, on health and healthcare, on youth. There's lots of information there. And the live streams also come from the national website and are also cross-posted on the California Facebook page and the Bay Area Facebook page. And you can also click on the California, on the map on California, and sign up to receive mailings from the statewide campaign. We are a state-based campaign, and we're organizing from the top of the state to the bottom of the state. And so you're welcome to invest, look into the campaign more. And then there's the California at poorpeoplescampaign.org email where you can contact us directly, also with questions or comments or feedback from this session.
Anybody have any other comments before we close?
I'd just like to say thank you all and thank us for being where we are and doing what we're doing.
Yes, and we want to thank you, Jackie and Linda, for sharing your story. Your stories are both very compelling, and it's the heart of the work to amplify the voices who are impacted. And so, we appreciate you making time and, bringing your stories forward.
Yeah, I'll just share
please, Linda.
I'll
Yes,
just
go
share quick
ahead.
feedback about holding elected officials accountable. I've actually taken a point to put all 3 members of Congress in my contact list, and I call them regularly. And it was a little nerve-wracking at first because you're like, I'm not sure what I would say. Would they like what I'm saying? And then it just took a few tries to just kind of get the hang of it. And then I've never had a negative reaction with anybody from their offices. They're always very receptive to what I had to say, and take my message, ask me where I'm from, and assure me of all the things that elected official is promised to do. And so I want to encourage everybody to do that and make it a habit. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And even if you think your member of Congress is very liberal and will always do the right thing, they need to hear from you because they need to know how they should prioritize what they're doing. So just make your voice heard.
Yeah, I want to plus one that in one of our
just a simple phone call.
And one of our respected leaders was talking about his experience in government, and he said that when they get 15 calls on an issue, then they start trying to figure out, what to do. 15. And so imagine when they get 1,500, right? So your voice, it makes a difference when we pick up the phone or email or show up, and let them know that we have expectations of them, that we demand to be seen, to be heard, to have our needs respected and addressed, our concerns addressed, and that we won't be silent anymore.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I'd like to follow with what Linda said about contacting your representative. Even if you think perhaps they're on the wrong side of where the issue should be, maybe with persistence and communication, we can discover that they're just plain ignorant and they can be educated. And if they can't be educated that way, maybe they can be educated at the next ballot box. So one thing to keep in mind is that this revival of the Poor People's Campaign is 3 years old. That's really young. And we now have tens of thousands of people just in California who are related and connected with this movement. And so we're building it week by week. One of the things that just amazes me is that somehow or other, this campaign just mushrooms about every 4 or 5 months. And it's just startling and amazing and exciting to see, because you work on it and you put a lot of effort into it and everybody's working together, but you can't always see it happening, and then it pops up right in front of you, and it's really beautiful. So this is early, and we're building on holding decision makers accountable by having conversations with them so that they understand the advocacy and why it's important, and why it's practical and beneficial, and getting some clear communication from them as to why they think they can't do it, and also finding out who their governmental allies are, because you know, it's not only just putting pressure on an elected official or a decision maker, but it's talking to those that they listen to. And sometimes you put pressure on officials to pay attention by doing that. And of course, with COVID, we've pretty much ruled out true direct action, but we certainly have that as one of the very vital tools of strategic communication with decision makers, that when the COVID pandemic is contained enough to be outside and to be engaged in direct action, we certainly will be organizing nonviolent, peaceful civil resistance to help decision makers understand what they need to understand. And so that's certainly a part of holding officials accountable. So so maybe it is time to wind up. We've just got a few more minutes. I certainly want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been really great to have an opportunity to share our thoughts with you and our experiences with you. We certainly hope to see you again sometime soon. If we end up in a Zoom call sometime before too long and you recognize us, please introduce yourselves, because we haven't had the same experience of being able to see you and to share more directly like sometimes the Zoom meetings are. So, you know, say hi to us when you have that opportunity. And in the meantime, we certainly invite you to join in with the movement whenever you can. And in the meantime, I'd like you to keep a couple of things in mind. Particularly, you've heard people mention this idea that this is a fusion movement. And the way I see that is that this is an emphasis on the reality that all of these injustices that we're talking about are truly interlocking. There's no pulling them apart. When we talk about the war economy, we're talking about tremendous negative impact on poverty and on racism and ecological devastation. And when we're talking about ecological devastation, we're certainly talking about systemic racism. It's impossible to pull these apart. And so what I want to mention is that, excuse me, if you have been involved in righteous work for a long time, and if that's what you're doing now, then just remember that your issue is my issue, and my issue is our issue. And there's no separating it. And if I get mine all taken care of, it's not like I get to go home. It's like we've got stuff to do, and it's all together. And so if you're doing that already, keep it up, you know. And at the same time, join us when you can. In the meantime, keep us in your peripheral vision. You know, expand your awareness to sort of see what we're doing. And for heaven's sakes, also get our attention, you know, help us see and be more aware of what you're doing, so that sooner rather than later, we can start to link up and start to be working in concert and start to be building a more cohesive movement where we are all working for the same goal whether it's this part or that part, it's all the same energy. And so please keep us in mind, and let us know what you're doing. And with that, I think we're probably ready. Anybody else have a final closing thought?
Do we have, how are people getting in touch with us?
Oh, I think there was a slide for.
Well, I'm gonna put in the link to the feedback form, so you have a way to get a hold of us. Is that a good idea, Nell?
I think we did. I think we decided against the feedback form.
Okay.
But people can email us at California@Poor People's Campaign. And are you speaking about the Action Network form?
Yeah.
And we have a thank you from Cynthia. Thanks to everyone.
Now, can I make a correction on the email? It's california@poorpeoplescampaign.org.
Right, that's what it says.
Oh no, because it was, somebody said California@Poor People's Campaign.
Yeah.
Can we write it in the chat so I could share it? Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, are we ready for the outro music?
Yep, let's roll.
Okay, here we go. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are here.
And we are here.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
For liberation.
For liberation.
And we got nothing to lose.
And we got nothing to lose.
But our chains.
But our chains.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new unsettling force, and we're here. A new unsettling force for liberation, and we got nothing to lose but our chains. We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. A new unsettling force, and we're here. A new unsettling force for liberation, and we got nothing to lose but our chains. And we got nothing to lose but our chains. And we got nothing to lose but our chains. And we got nothing to lose but our chains. And we got nothing to lose but
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
So thanks, everybody. We hope
Thank you, Nell.
Yeah, we hope the rest of the conference goes well for everybody, and see you in the streets or in the Zoom room, whichever, wherever we see you, we will look forward to that. Thank you, Victor, for your tech support. Thank you again, Linda and Jackie, for your testimonies, and Nancy, Irene, David, thank you all for being the planning and tech team together.
Well, thank you, Nell. Thank you so
And
much.
then
Yeah.
we can't leave without
you.
saying forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one
Not
step
one
back.
step back.
Forward together.
Not
Not one step back.
Step back.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Next time, be safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Nice to see you, Linda and Jackie.
Nice to meet you all.
All righty, take care.
Bye.
Bye.